On today's episode of Anime Afterthought, a certain scientific railgun, Season 3, Episode 21, Doppelganger. It looks like Misaka's dreams are crushed by the incredible weight of her realization that Misaki's boobs are the real deal. Seriously, you gotta give a round of applause to that scene. Now, last we left off, we were given the best episode of the season thus far. We bore witness to the devastatingly dynamic fight that was Yumiya versus Frenda. With top-tier choreography and some of the best back and forth I've seen in a while, it was only a matter of time before one of these girls gets the upper hand. And it just goes to show you when push comes to shove, our mousy little explosive level 0 can really hold her own. Well, at least when she's not dealing with a maniac laser wielding level 5 Esper. And although to me, this is one of the highlights of the season so far when it comes to pure aesthetics, but also due to its emotional impact. I mean, you have to love how a certain series is so fucking dense. I mean, they literally have multiple timelines from different perspectives layered on top of each other, creating one giant story. And unfortunately, due to it being so dense, you sometimes lose perspective, especially when dealing with certain events that have already happened. We know the unfortunate outcome of Yumiya as well as Frenda, but where exactly does it fall? And unfortunately, after some comments put it out, the pivotal clue to determine where this lies in the overall timeline, we know. See, at the end of last week's episode, we see Satin waiting for her promised meal with Frenda. Yes, a week after the incident went down. And I question myself, where exactly does this fall? Is Frenda dead? Is she ultimately waiting for someone who will never appear? And you guys let me in on the hint. Look at Uiharu, the one whose knock was mistaken for Frenda. Yes, her arm in that state indicates that she's already had her interaction with Kakaine, meaning at this point in the story, Frenda is dead. Satin is waiting for a ghost, and you feel this wave of just emotion roll over for you, like, my God, Satin, it's so sad. Like, you just want to reach through the screen and give her a fucking hug. Kazuma has definitely chosen a bold approach, especially when it comes to developing a character after her untimely death. How can you make me feel so much about a character that I know is already dead? But that's just it, whether it be a literary strategy or coincidence. Traveling down this path, I'm already well aware that this particular event will definitely stick with me. I will say one thing is for sure, Railgun has its work cut out for it. You're really gonna have to pull out all the stops to pass episode 20. My favorite this season so far. Oh yeah, and Gunha was pretty badass too. And this is where we pick up today's episode. Now, Misaka at this point is still having flashbacks into her first encounter with Indian poker. Yes, remember getting the card from Junko, and it just so happened to be Misaki themed. It looks like this thing is really taking its emotional and physical toll as we see that Misaka at this point is completely drained. Now, walking down the street, we get a blast from the past in the form of a familiar face we see as Kana. Now, this is actually early on in the Railgun series. I believe it was the level upper arc, as well as making another appearance later on. I believe it was the sisters arc. Now, while the two seem to be having a lovely conversation on their way to the bus terminal, it takes a very surprising turn. They're actually passing by the old Indian poker dealer, the one that sold the legendary bust upper. It just so happens that Kana brings that up. Very weird for a little tiny girl to be bringing up something about breasts. Well, eventually it makes sense. See, at some point during their conversation, probably around that area, it seems Misaki has taken control of Kana, unbeknownst to Misaka, obviously taking this opportunity to just jab at her. Well, it seems like Misaka has enough of her ship at this point. You know what? I am flat-chested, but yours can't be so good, and just fucking hauls off and basically sexually assaults Misaki. And at this point, her whole world falls apart, realizing that these big breasts are softer and heftier and just all around perfect. Her world is now crushed. I mean, you have to admit, that whole entire scene is absolutely fucking hilarious. Okay, so enough joking around. We cut back to Kuroko and Uiharu and the rest of Judgment. Now they're finally taking the threat of Indian poker serious. I mean, we've seen it several times have some pretty devastating consequences. Not to mention, there is actually a threat of a security breach. I mean, these places that these individuals who are recording go to are really not common knowledge. I mean, a random dude showing up in the Garden of Learning, I mean, that's, cause for concern, especially when it comes to, security as a whole. I mean, that's just scratching the surface. We've seen before that it can teach people very bad techniques. It can show that, the whereabouts of certain atom dissecting tools, aka the tweezers. I mean, the potential for learning is great, but the potential for disaster seems even greater at this point. So it looks like they're finally taking notice of that. Not to mention, once again, at least for me, I had a devastating flashback seeing Uiharu with the arm brace, like, fuck me, Frenda's dead, god damn it. So while Judgment has finally taken notice of Indian poker, they're not the only one. It seems Shokuhou has taken an interest in it as well, sending out her attaché to do a lot of the groundwork. He has finally discovered the person, or at least who they assume is responsible for it, and this is Kuriba Ryoku, the white and black haired girl we see from the intro. So while they've discerned maybe who is responsible for it, they still don't know the exact whereabouts, so he still has to do a little work to do, but it seems so does Misaki. In particular, she needs to coerce Misaka once again to help her out. Now, we do get a lot of information that basically Ryoku has been through some shit. At least the intro now makes sense. The whole giant split in her fucking face. Yeah, it turns out that she was involved with an experiment dealing with cyborgs or cybernetic implantments and shit like that. Basically, they dissected her body, or would it be vivisected? Basically, they cut her up and then basically pieced together two separate entities, both with corresponding cybernetic / human parts. I mean, they basically cut her in half and divvied her pieces up, creating two individual Ryokus at this point. And there were no issues. Each one lived, I guess, a fulfilled life for a set amount, and then at one point they were put back together. Now, dealing with Academy City, I mean, we all know that, well, first of all, they fucking suck, but there's always a shady side to everything. On the front, I mean, the goal of the experiment was to obviously reach your cybernetics, but if it had a secondary outcome, I guess all's well that ends well, right? It just so happens that the result was the generation of a soul. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense. They divvied up one individual to make two corresponding ones that lived completely separate lives. What happens if you take all of those parts and recreate the original Ryoku, then take all the cybernetic parts and then recreate the other one? What happens to that other soul? What happens to the entity of the other Ryoku? Like I said, on the surface is very altruistic. You see advancements in human cybernetics that could save a lot of disabled people, but underneath it looks like their main goal was to create an artificial soul. Now at this point, we all know that Misaka would gladly jump in after hearing the devastating shit that's fucking going on, but of course Misaki seems it to be appropriate to kind of prod her, saying, you know what, since it was successful, they'll have to retest the results, maybe with some child errors or maybe with some fucking clones. And of course this gets Misaka riled up, and we already know she's fucking in. Now what we didn't know is the fact that their entire conversation was being monitored. We see that Mitori as well as Dali are often enjoying fucking donuts and watching this entire conversation go down. Now we know at this point that Misaki's interest in the whole experiment is, I believe, its relationship to the original clone Dali experiment, but Mitori really does bring up a good point. Why would you involve Misaka to the point where actually like you bring up the sisters program? Like, she would have helped no matter what, or better yet, I could use my fucking abilities and just, you know, easy in, easy out. I don't know why you need to do this. And she comes with the theory that maybe Misaki is testing Misaka about her relationship and whether, you know, how strong it is with the sisters. Like, I'm pretty sure at this point, of course we have a God's eye view, that Misaka is ride or die. I mean, you get in with her, you're set for life. She's pretty much do anything for her sisters. I don't understand the testing, but all we know for sure is that she's in. Now we cut to where the research of this other Ryoko is going down. This entity known as Ryoko, and it seems like everything's going okay. I mean, at first you're tricked into thinking that this is the real Ryoku. She's obviously human. She's interacting with the scientists and talking to the main dude, saying, you know what, when can I fucking leave and get out of here? She's very human at this point. She even cuts herself on a mug, but even in her mind, she begins to showcase symptoms of maybe she's not exactly who she thinks she is. And obviously, you know, going through that little traumatic of not being able to remember anything, it seems the veil has lifted, and when we cut back to looking at her hand, it's now a robotic one, and so is her eye. And yeah, what we've been actually witnessing is the cyborg, is the other Ryoku, and it's kind of eerie. Like, she was so human just a second ago, and then there goes the fucking blinders. Now remember, Misaka at this point is trying to infiltrate this research area, very stealthy. You know, she's in her, as she put it, her tomboy look. I mean, the point of a disguise is to be disguised, so if people are mistaking you for a boy, isn't that good? Why would you ask for something more friendly? That makes no sense. But it just so happens so serendipitously, as she was trying to break in, the cyborg was breaking out. Now this is actually not good. We have an entity with assuming unknown abilities. I mean, we do know that she is bulk as shit since she punched her way through a fucking concrete and steel fucking wall. She fell a fucking, what looked like 1,000 feet to the ground. Even even though there was a couple flags to break her fall, thanks to Misaka. Misaka said this chick had to weigh a fucking ton, so she's basically a fucking Terminator, all right? And it seems she's dead set on understanding herself. But we really can't forget that this is not the real Ryoku. In fact, we actually see her show up in the next scene, finding it prudent to investigate, you know, this individual, and seeing how the fact that her cybernetic counterpart just fucking escaped, Misaka and Misaki take this opportunity to go, you know, interrogate the real one. And upon first glance, she somehow knew everything would eventually transpire to this. Meanwhile, with the real Ryoku undergoing interrogation between Mental Out and Railgun, Robo-Ryoko seems to have machinations underway, which included acquiring fake skin, as well as a taut little outfit with the back showing. But remember, she's currently on the run, so I guess the Institute, the research, the organization in charge of, you know, this experiment has decided to use the Underground Association, the faction, the dark side of Academy Cities, to repossess the malfunctioning cyborg. And it just so happens to be Scavengers. Yes, still reeling from the utter defeat at the hands of Accelerator. This is it. It's do or die. They need a successful mission. Otherwise, the governing board says they're out. And so ends episode 21. Once again, we're hit with an amazing fucking episode. I mean, it's not level 20 quality, but you know, it's pretty fucking unique if you really think about it. I mean, splitting up one girl to make two and then putting them back, one human, one completely cybernetic, like that does really bring up a good point of, would it actually associate itself as being human? Like, would there be a soul? I mean, at one point they both had living components to it, so it's very weird. It's a very weird fucking thought. Once again, the reappearance of Scavenger, I think that's pretty unique. Definitely a unique group of kids. Like I said, last time we saw them, I'm pretty sure they were pissing their pants. Or at least one was. Not to mention, I want to know what the fuck Misaki is up to. Is she really testing Misaka's resolve when it comes to the sister? Not 100% sure. I love to see Matori and Dolly again. Finally, Judgment is taking this Indian poker shit seriously. Like, come on guys, there's some devastating potential in this shit. But I gotta say, the best scene is the one in the very fucking beginning. Say what you will, but A++ to the Misaki Groat Fest. I mean, that scene was fucking hilarious. It's like you don't really need it, but I'm so glad they included it. Where do we go from here? Yeah, we gotta figure out what the fuck the Robo-Ryoko is up to. Seeing her snap that dude's arm, pretty much like the first Terminator movie. Yeah, I'm kind of scared where she's going with this shit. Not to mention what Mental Out is up to. And finally, what the future of Indian poker holds. I mean, like I said, they're finally starting to realize the devastating potential of this seemingly innocuous skill learning, dream sharing program. Oh, God, I still can't get the image of Ueharu's arm brace out of my fucking head. Anyways, with all that being said and more Railgun next week, I honestly cannot wait for future episodes.